Oh, okay. My sound is an issue. Hang on. I'm an idiot. I got my system sound on speakers instead of in headphones. Right, should be good now. Dooby dooby doo. Hello, hello, hello. It is me. Oh, good. That is good to know.
Okay. I wasn't on mine. I wasn't even. I was muted on mine. So okay. So we are streaming. So let's just
Oh, we
check
are
to make sure
live.
we are live. There we go. Okay.
All right, we should go and spam it everywhere then.
Mhm. Mhm. I'm just trying to watch to see if it's sputtering a little bit or I think it looks okay. Yeah. Yeah. I think it looks okay on stream.
Spam, 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 spam. Oh, um, apparently. So I got hacked this week.
Yes.
Apparently, I have not remembered to rejoin people's discords.
Oh, did you end up leaving them or did the hacker leave them?
No, so I kind of like messaged people and was like, just kick me
Kick
because
me.
anywhere I
Yeah.
had admin rights, I was like really worried about.
Right, right.
So yeah, there's a couple of discords that I haven't actually rejoined.
No, that makes
Oopsie.
sense.
I don't even know how to go back and find them now either.
Yeah, you're going to need an invite link. That's typically how that goes.
Yes, yes, we will get there. All right. And then are you tweeting as well, or do you want me to tweet?
Um, if you don't mind tweeting, that would be super helpful.
Cool. Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I really thought I was going to um lose that Discord account.
I I bet.
But yeah, they sorted it out really quickly. So good.
I mean, that's fantastic that they were able to do that, honestly. Like and yeah, like Scotta emailed me and or messaged me on uh Discord and he's like, "Hey, Claire got hacked." Um
Hmm.
and actually the hacker had sent me a message, but what's so interesting about that, Claire, is that I saw Scotta's image, like profile image, as like one of the chat bubbles, and I was like, "Who is this? I don't know this person." So I actually went to that first instead of yours,
Oh,
and so I was like, "What? Oh, okay." So yeah, I purposely didn't, click on anything. When was the last time we recorded?
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it would have been the 10th, right? Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so the 10th. So theoretically, it should be here.
Tweeting now,
Cool. Okay.
and I just need to go on mine and retweet. Okay. There we are.
For some reason, I can't find the like how we're rating the books. For some reason, I can't find it.
Oh, did I copy and paste it
I don't know.
into a chat? I
I,
bet I did.
I really want to just screenshot it because it's one of those websites that like.
Oh, I did. Okay, so if you scroll up in our DM,
Okay.
it's not that far up. There's a document, and I created it on Google Docs, where I just copied the rating bit
Okay. Perfect.
to a document. So hopefully that will help. I may have actually forgotten to put it into our actual booknook Discord.
Well, I didn't know if you were thinking about. Oh, it says that I need to request access.
Oh, you should have it. Hang on.
Interesting. I just requested access.
Okay. It's probably come through to my email. Bear with. Yeah, there we go. Think I've given you access?
All right, let's refresh and see. I'm in.
Good.
Okay, now I need to make
I
my
love
way
how
back.
we go live and then
There we go.
do all the admin.
Yeah.
Hi
I
everyone.
I know it. Honestly, it's helpful for me because it's like you don't need to immediately start talking to
Yeah.
chat. There's like less pressure to like immediately start talking to them,
Mm.
especially if nobody's chatting. It's like you just kind of get to see a little behind the scenes. Um,
Yeah, exactly. It's quite nice. Bit of a gives people a chance to filter in if they're interested, and all that
yes,
stuff.
exactly. Um, I'm gonna pull
So
up on
non-fiction book
Goodreads.
of the month. Just tag everybody for good measure.
Yeah,
Sorry.
deal with our spam.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
All right, real quick, I'm gonna just go get something to drink out of the fridge, and hopefully with some caffeine.
Good plan. Once we start talking, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
You'll wake up. Okay, chat. It's just you and me. If there's anybody in here, we are just chatting about general stuff while we wait for things to filter in, people to filter in if they're interested in listening. And Tim's gone to grab something to drink, and then we'll get started.
Okay. So this is what I have. It came free in my grocery order. Sometimes they just throw like random free things. Like this little sticker says, "Thanks for your order. Enjoy a treat on us." I'm assuming like there's like a little dent here, so they probably can't sell it or something. So they just kind of toss it in. Um, and yeah, so it's raspberry lime. It has 160 milligrams of caffeine per can.
Is that a lot or?
I honestly have no idea. Um,
Hiya, Tala.
so yeah. Anyway,
Well, hopefully it'll wake you up.
yes,
I've got
exactly.
I've got a cup of chai tea, which has got sort of cinnamon and cardamom and stuff in it, and it's yummy.
Oh, awesome.
Mm. It's probably going to go too quick. You might have to have a break in the middle while I go and boil the kettle again.
Right.
All right, are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's wait. Oh, before we get started,
Mm.
are we gonna try to time ourselves? Like, are we gonna try to
Um,
stick to like a? Because I can clock watch if we need to.
yeah, we should. Oh yeah, well, yeah. I don't go on camera that often, Tala. It's I don't really like the way I look.
Wait, is Atala talking about still Kyle?
Yes,
Oh, okay, okay.
yeah. So, yeah, and Kyle. So the funny thing about Kyle is, so I met him in real life. We went to
Mm-hmm.
a thing, an Xbox thing together, and he is so tall. Like, and you do not get that from watching streams. You think, to me, he looks kind of, short actually when he's streaming, and he's so tall. And I'm really not very tall at all. I'm like 5'2".
Yeah,
So yeah.
I think I remember Kyle meeting up with you guys maybe one time when Mags was IRLing, and um, that was the first time that I saw how tall he was. You know, like in
Mm,
comparison to others, and Forrest is actually really tall as well. So
yeah, they're about the same height, I think.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you put me and Peeps next to them, and it's like, yeah, well, little and large.
Yeah. Okay,
um,
I am ready though if you are. So.
okay, all right, we're ready. So just to before we properly start, for
Mhm.
anybody that is sitting in the chat watching, we don't do a huge amount of interaction with chat while we're talking about the book because we're also recording a podcast, which doesn't always translate very well when you're, um, publishing it online and people are listening along afterwards. So we may, if people have got questions or a particularly valid point about the book, then put it into the chat and we will try and get to it and we'll read it and maybe have a discussion around it. But please don't be offended if we don't get to it because we're not always really all that focused on the chat while we're doing this. So, um, without further ado, we will get going. So, hi everyone, welcome to the Book Nook stream. This week it's fallen on me to introduce and kind of help direct the conversation. Um, we've been reading Educated by Tara Westover, or Tara Westover as she pronounces it, which you can see in the middle of the screen there. It's a memoir about her life growing up and how she became educated. So, before we get really into the book, we do need to, I think, maybe discuss a little bit about trigger warnings
Mhm.
because there are some difficult themes within the book. There's some stuff talked about around abuse, and also some hot topics around religion, that some people might not be ready for or want to listen to. So we will try as best we can, while we're talking, to give out a trigger warning if we're getting into a territory that might cause somebody some discomfort. So, uh, what do you think? Anything you want to add to that, Tim?
No, just so for those of you that don't know, my name's Tim. I'm just one of the co-hosts on this podcast, and the voice that you just heard is Claire.
Did I actually not introduce myself?
I don't think so. I don't think so, but that's okay.
Okay, we knew this was going to go well this
I
week because
mean,
I'm running it. You know,
it's episode 2, so
that's
hopefully
true.
they've listened to episode 1 and they know who we are.
Yes, yes. My name is Claire. I'm an English lady, and this is Tim, who is an American
Yes, regrettably.
man. Oh, well, we might come on to that soon
Yes, I
in
know.
this
I know.
discussion.
Yeah.
All right.
But
So
no, I think that
yeah,
you said it perfect. Like, there are sensitive topics that we'll attempt to be respectful of, but I think that we are both opinionated people, and we'll probably will have our own opinion about some things that some subjects and themes of the book. Um, and so just take them as that they're opinions, and Claire and I will continue to be respectful, and we're not out to speak super negatively about anything in particular, but we call injustices where we see them. Is that
We
fair?
do. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'll start by just giving a bit of an overview of the book. So it is a memoir. Um, Tara Westover wrote it herself. She was 17 the first time she set foot in a classroom. Born to survivalists in the mountains of Idaho, she prepared for the end of the world by stockpiling home canned peaches and sleeping with her head for the hills bag. In the summer, she stewed herbs for her mother, a self taught midwife and healer, and in the winter, she salvaged her in her father's junkyard. So, it's a memoir about her upbringing in a Mormon family in rural Idaho. She's the youngest of seven siblings and the daughter of an extremely devout and fundamentalist Mormon father, Gene. Um, Mother is called Faye, and as it said in the blurb, her mother is a self-taught midwife and herbalist. Um, and that's sort of the subject of the book. So one of the things that the biggest theme of it is education, which is obviously from the title, but how education can change somebody's life, and uh, how an education can be personal to you. I think is a great theme of the book. What was your kind of first impressions? I think of the book, Tim.
Oh, okay. So, um, I came across this book just in terms of a recommendation by looking at what are people reading right now in nonfiction, and this is a book that was at least published. I don't remember exactly when it was written. It was published in 2019, so the book is a few years old. I actually had not heard of it until I just went looking for nonfiction books to read for this podcast. And when, of course, me being part of, for those of you that don't know, listeners and viewers, I work in education. So right away, the cover of the book caught me, like grabbed me. The title's "Educated," and it has a picture of a pencil on it. Like I'm just immediately drawn to it. So I started to read the blurb, and I was just like, "Ooh, this is interesting," and I'm really curious to see like where it goes. And my first like impression of the book, like as I was and I should say I listened to the audiobook
Oh,
version of
me too.
this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so my first impressions after the first few chapters was, oh boy, this is going to be a heavy book. Like emotionally heavy, and
Mm.
and the amount of trauma that this person Tara has gone through is extensive, and we're going to hear a lot about it. Um, yeah, so that's kind of like what immediately stuck out to me.
Yeah, funny you should say that. So, when I first started reading it, I thought it reminded me of. I don't know if you ever got into this craze of reading misery lit, they call it,
Oh
where
no.
it's true stories of people that have had horrendously difficult lives. Things like people that have been kept in a cellar for 20 years, or were
Oh.
horrendously abused as a child before being rescued later on in life or whatever. And there was, I think it was in the 90s, a whole raft of those sorts of books came out, and um, people really lapped them up. And I think they were really quite harrowing. Um, and I'm not really sure why they were so popular because they were quite awful, really. But people wanted to tell their stories, and they did, and other people wanted to read them, which is a good thing. But so immediately when I first started reading it, I was sort of brought back to those sorts of books where I thought, well, maybe this is going to be, another misery lit kind of book. And I
Mm.
don't think it is. I think overall the tone was probably lighter than perhaps it should have been, even though the subject matter is quite difficult. Um, it didn't feel like a really sad book. Um, it's really difficult to describe in that way, actually.
Well,
But
okay. I
yeah,
think that you and I'm not surprised. We probably feel similarly about this, and so um, I think that I understand what you're saying or what you're attempting to kind of like describe, and it's that the the author and the way that it's written, there's it's very factual,
hmm,
the way that it's presented to you, and it is like telling a story with the emotion withdrawn. Um, the
yeah, certainly
emotion
some of it.
the emotion is what's coming up within me, like when
Mm,
it happens, when I'm hearing about some of the things, some of the conversations, the dialogue between family members of Tara, um, and hearing how she grew up in Idaho, on this farm essentially, and having to go through lots of physical labor and injuries, and learning through her parents' views of the world, views of what life should be and is for this family. Um, and as a child, just blind acceptance, right? Because
mm.
that's all there is. That's all you
That's your
can.
world.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's your
exactly.
world, and that's what you believe. Yeah, absolutely.
It's all
Um,
you have been exposed to.
yeah. So, I mean, this is kind of the background to the book. Is very much they're very isolated. She doesn't go to school. None of her siblings go to school. They don't. The I think four of them don't have birth certificates.
Correct.
They were
Like
never
the
registered.
youngest four,
The
I
youngest
think.
four. Yeah. Um, she eventually gets a birth certificate at the age of 9. They don't. They go to church, but they don't go to see doctors. They don't believe in Western medicine. They don't. They believe that medicine and doctors are the devil's work. The father is pretty extreme his um, in his theology, um, and even to describe them as Mormon isn't really doing it justice because it's almost like a very extreme form of Mormonism, from what I gather. I don't know
Yeah.
a huge amount about the religion itself, but the book is not about being a Mormon and not being a Mormon.
Hmm.
It's about that life, and it could easily represent any community where people are isolated.
Yeah.
It's very rural, and I think that's probably a bigger theme than anything else. It's that isolation, that kind of being away from perhaps accepted norms, I guess.
Yeah.
Um,
And
but yeah, she's absolutely living in her world that has been drawn for her by her father, and by extension her mother. So that's what she knows, and that's why when she goes to a university at age 17, she doesn't understand what the word Holocaust means or what it was referencing to. Um, and she very innocently asks, and that's one of the first bits in the book is, uh, I didn't know what a Holocaust was. I didn't know anything about civil rights. I didn't know anything about that stuff. Um, and yeah, it's quite incredible that, and obviously anybody that puts their hand up in a class and says, "Oh, hey, what's the Holocaust?" I think the initial reaction is going to be they think they're taking a piss. They're not.
right. Yeah.
They're not.
That
So, yeah.
they're either purposely um discrediting it, or
Mm,
being trying to be funny, like trying to make a joke, or yeah, like you said, like coming off as anti-Semitic. um and But no, I mean, the biggest theme that I think, at least in the terms of like her childhood and how she grew up, is that of turmoil and believing is kind of given to her and exposed to her. And a lot of that has to do with her father's ideologies and his opinions on the world, the materialistic side of the world. And it's very interesting. Like the father in this book, Tara's father is a main character. Like
Mm.
it almost everything ties back to the father figure, the head of the household. Um, it's he is the dictator of knowledge for the children, and it isn't until like maybe when Tara is maybe 10, maybe a little bit more, that she starts to see her older siblings test the water of like what else is out there. Or she describes her brother Tyler exposing her to music that she's never heard before. So we're talking about a very, very sheltered lifestyle that
Mm.
this family grew up with, and what the father said goes is
Mm.
really kind of how things went for her and for her family. So, yeah, it sometimes it was difficult to read some of the things that went on, and I just wanted to. There was many moments that I just wanted to scream at. Like I was actually when
Mhm.
I was listening to it in the car, I was like yelling back at Tara, like
Yeah.
yeah, and it is amazing to. To hear all of the harrowing injuries. Like, we won't go into specifics about the injuries in case people want to read those portions of the book. I think that what isn't a spoiler is talking about that every single one of these injuries was treated by her mother, who kind of was this herbalist. She was a midwife for the community around her on the mountain,
Hmm.
essentially. And
And quite far afield, it seemed like she had to drive quite far
yeah,
at times, I think,
at
to go.
times,
And yeah, so she was
yes.
quite sought after, I think, as a midwife in the area.
I don't want to misuse the word holistic, but it seemed as though like everything medicinal that kind of that they used in the house, or for her career, if you want to call it that, her job as a midwife, was all based around natural remedies, natural
Mm.
herbs, tinctures. They talk about tinctures a lot, so like the mixing of this herb and this oil, and things like
Yeah,
that.
and a little bit of homeopathy thrown in,
Mm.
yeah. So, um, they, yeah, like you say, they completely distrust any medicine. That's devil's work. It's against God. They just would not go to a doctor. So, um, part of the family business was scrap metal work. They had a what do you call it? A yard,
A
scrap metal
junkyard.
yard, junkyard.
Yeah.
So the work was incredibly dangerous, and all of the kids got involved and worked in this yard.
Had to.
From
Like they
Yeah,
didn't have a
from
choice.
yeah, yeah. They you didn't have a lot of money when she was younger, and um, they had to make money, and this was how they did it. And it was incredibly hard work, incredibly dangerous work. So that's where these injuries came in. And also, so I work in construction, and her father did a lot of construction as well as scrapyarding. So he
Hmm.
built huge warehouse sheds and things like that, which apparently he designed himself, did all the structural engineering for, which is incredible because that's actually a very difficult thing to do. Um, and but they would do roofing and things, and he wouldn't wear harnesses, and they would be, running along purlins. And obviously health and safety is quite an important thing to me because of the industry that I work in. And there was no health and safety, and unfortunately when you don't have health and safety practices, accidents happen a lot. The father was not really interested in um,
Sorry, Claire, I can't hear you. Hmm. No. You can hear me? Okay. Yeah, I can't hear you. So let me try to sort this out. Oh, noise suppression? Why is that on? Hold up. Okay, that everything looks good. I just don't know why I'm not hearing you. Oh, I see, I see. Hold up. I can hear you now.
Oh. Oh, good. It was you, not me.
It was me. I knew that it was me. I just
Oh, God.
sorry, Claire. Okay.
Oh, no. Okay. We're back.
We're back. I think everything is good again.
Oh, wow. That's going to be fun editing that.
It's going to be the most fun.
Right. So I don't know where you stopped hearing me.
Um, let's see. We were talking. Oh, you were just explaining like the junkyard.
Oh, yes. Yes, yes, yes.
So
Okay.
wherever you would like to pick up from when you stopped talking about that, then I'll know to edit, like to like mesh the two,
Okay.
or we can just like if you feel like it was like an easy cut, we can just start talking about it again, or talking about something else.
I think that I can. So I was talking about health and safety. Did you
Okay,
hear that?
I heard last thing I heard you say was that you worked in construction and her father was building like large warehouses.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay. So we'll pick it up from there. So,
okay.
um, yeah, so her father built and designed these huge warehouses, and the whole family got involved in building them. So and there was no health and safety at all. So, the father really believed that they didn't need to wear harnesses or put in any sort of safety equipment or really worry about it. And I think the implicit uh, thing with the book is that it seems to be that he really felt that it was God's will whether they had an accident or not. And then, they would go and get treated by the mum, and that was God's will too. So,
Mm-hmm.
and there, like you say, there was some pretty horrific injuries that happened to them.
Yeah, there were.
A couple of, random explosions and things. It was really bad. Um, and yeah, um, yeah, it's difficult. But I think the tone that she gives all of that is pretty um sanguine is probably the right word. She doesn't try and make a villain out of anybody in this book.
No, as much as I wanted her to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I was pretty, screaming as well, at it, and certain things where I think, fairly early on, at a really young age, her grandparents who lived just down the hill from them, her grandmother tries to convince her to leave home and go and live with them or go with them to Arizona,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I'm like, go, go,
Like this is your
um,
way out.
yeah. But of course, at that age, she doesn't know that she wants to get out. She doesn't know that there's an out to get to.
Right.
It's like, um, she knows nothing about that. But as you were saying, it was like, at some point during her fairly young age, and a couple of her brothers have left home. Her older brother Tyler is still at home, and she starts listening with Tyler to his music. Um, and there's a lot of choral music and opera, and that is really what starts, I think, um, in her. That's the bit that has the impact on her, that starts her thinking about um, the world outside of Bucks Peak and outside of the family. And I think it's that music that actually takes her there.
I think, yeah, I think that that is a huge like point of like um exposure, like her just kind of like learning about other things, other possibilities. And she saw this same brother um teach himself.
Mm,
Like he was interested um in learning more than he had. And what's really interesting, and what I wish this book, I mean, this is a memoir, so it is from Tara's perspective, but I wish that we knew more about like what her brothers were thinking at the time, or like how they got exposed to it, like what made Tyler want to learn more. And like he went and bought a textbook and basically was teaching himself, and wanted to go to college, um, all without getting, a GED or, a diploma for high school. So,
yeah.
yeah.
So I think also a bit of background. I don't know whether, um, again, it's difficult because you don't really want to spoil the book for the people that want to read it. But I think another bit that needs to explain about the mindset of the family um, is really about the father's paranoia about the government
Hmm.
in general, and the government coming for him and his guns, um,
Yes.
which is, I think, a fairly typical survivalist's point of view. Um, but he references this thing that happened in Ruby Ridge with this family, and the way he tells his family is that the government went for them and they besieged their house and eventually shot a couple of them, including a young boy. Um, and that story was very much kind of, the government will come for us.
Hmm.
We have to be prepared for it. And that was what the ideology, that was the theory that Tarawa grew up with, that the government would come for them. Um, and that's another background. And I think also in the early prologue of the book, she talks a little bit about the fact that in a classroom during a psychology lesson, she first hears the term bipolar
Hmm.
and realizes that that is describing her father.
Yeah.
And so this paranoia and the delusions and the episodes of depression and everything else, sort of, she felt like he was probably bipolar. Obviously, never got diagnosed because wouldn't ever go and see a doctor or seek help for it. But it
No.
seems to be that was the case, that the father's mental illness really kind of permeated the entire family, and that's kind of the environment they grew up in.
Yeah, the interactions and encounters, both when times, when situations were like not a big deal versus what you would expect to be a big deal, the father's reactions were unpredictable, both in terms of like what he would say, but also like what his mindset was about it. And I know I'm speaking vaguely because I don't want to give too much away. But one of the things that kept popping up for me is like he would lash out, and then um, he would not lash out physically. He would lash out verbally a lot of the times, and multiple times Tara mentions like just lectures upon lectures. Like we're talking, could be hours, and that the mom just kind of like listens and kind of like nods along, and
Mm,
just kind of accepts everything for what it is. And so does Tara when she's younger, because that's just how it is.
mm,
And it's not really until she's exposed to other kids her age, or other, I should say, not always kids, because they were basically young adults at the time, but when she starts to hang out with other people that aren't from from that rural mountain life, that she's really realizing, wait, just like, this isn't how your mom talks to your dad, or how your dad talks to your mom, or like, I just feel like those family values and norms were like major eye openers for her when she finally was able to realize that her father was potentially bipolar.
Mm, yeah, and the modesty thing was quite a big theme as well. You know that
Oh
she had
yes.
to dress modestly at all times, and she really believed all of that
Oh
for
yeah.
quite a her entire young life. Um, she believed that if you wore a low cut top or a short skirt, that you were probably a whore.
Mm-hmm.
That was the language that was used.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think, obviously in her mind, she did not understand the violence of that sort of language. That's how bad that language is to use about a woman.
Absolutely.
Um,
Well, and I suppose this might be a good time. We've kind of avoided it, but another main character in this story is her brother Sean. Um,
mm,
and This is probably where we should probably talk about a trigger warning related to
yes,
domestic violence, sibling abuse, verbal abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, like all of physical abuse.
control and coercion. Yeah.
Control and coercion, absolutely. Um, so, um, Trigger warning for those right now, and we'll go ahead and keep talking then. But Sean seems to have inherited some similar traits as his father, but to a more maladaptive, dangerous, and quite, to be quite frank, uh, you know, I, I don't want to say evil, but like, just, I don't know. Uh,
He's
I don't know. I'm struggling with the words.
yeah, no, he's a pretty typical um a- abusive man.
Yeah.
The manipulation, the control, the gaslighting, all of that. So her brother Sean, just to set the scene, does go away from the family for a short time, goes to college, comes back. I think that's what happens. Comes back to work for his father, um, and he actually develops a fairly close relationship with Tara to
Mm-hmm.
start with. And well, I mean, it actually remains close for quite a long time, even through some of the stuff that he does to her.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just to her. And I think the first inkling that she gets, he's quite a violent person anyway. He's known in the local area as somebody that likes to fight,
Yeah.
which is actually quite unusual for a violent domestic abuse person because they're normally a lot more scared of real, somebody that can actually give them a fight back. But anyway, Sean is actually known as somebody that is a bit of a fighter in the area. And so he already has some violent tendencies. And I think the first inkling that she gets is when he starts going out with somebody. He's got a girlfriend. He's a little
Yes.
bit older and he starts going out with somebody from the local high school. And he starts parking outside the school to make sure that she's not walking with somebody else to a class or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So he keeps tabs on her. And then he makes her feel absolutely shitty when she doesn't do as he's asked her to or whatever. And so that controlling behavior then starts appearing. And that's the point where I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
And then he starts trying to teach Tara a lesson and starts abusing her, and then the sorries come afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
The gaslighting, if you didn't behave like this, I wouldn't have to do that to you.
Mm-hmm.
This is your fault. This is not my fault. I'm doing this because you need to be punished.
Right.
I'm sorry I hurt you. All of those things that is really typical of an abusive person. And it's really difficult to read. And um, I can relate to some of that. I have an older brother who we had some issues when we were younger. He's quite a lot older than me, and he was a pretty horrible drunk. And
Mm.
that's, he would get, he was quite young, but
Yeah.
he would go out and
Yeah.
get drunk. And then when he was drunk, he was not a very nice person to be around, and we had a few altercations. And since we've been grown ups and we've talked about it a lot, and we've absolutely come to terms with all of that, and I've completely forgiven him, and all of that is behind us. But I
Mm-hmm.
understand, that has left me with some scars, and some, particularly around drunk people. I don't like being around drunk people, and I think that's from that period of my life. And so these things really have an impact on you, even if you do end up working through it, working past it, and forgiving the person, um, and yourself, it still stays with you, I think. And that's so that part of this part of the book, which is quite a big part of the book, there's a lot of it, is was resonant to me, not in the same, scale, but
Mm-hmm.
similar kind of thing. And it's that old thing of when you're in a situation you can't see how bad it is. So she was hurt quite badly, yet she still wasn't getting to that point where she could escape it. And that's the tricky bit, I think, and that's the bit where I'm screaming at the book, going, "Get out! Get out! Get out! Tell
Yeah.
somebody! Talk to somebody! Please tell them!" And I think part of this book, actually, and there's a few situations, not just about Sean, but about other things, where she's not open about herself, and she's not saying, "This is happening to me," or "Please understand, this is why I've done what I've just done because of something that is broken inside me." She's not able to ask for help or really vocalize some of the internal struggles that she's having. And that, I think that was probably the biggest frustration for me, and not frustration in a I'm angry with her, but just in a I really want her to get the help, I really want her to do well. And all the way through the book I'm like, please, please talk to people, explain what's going on in your brain. um I think that was, something that I felt was, I don't know, how did you feel? Similar kind of
Um.
thought process, or?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely difficult to read or hear. And the entire time I just was like, okay, I really hope that she gets out. I really hope that she sees that this is not right. Because I think that she was initially, when this abuse started happening, I think that she was looking to her parents to be like, is anybody going to do something about this? And no one did. No one said it's wrong, that you shouldn't be treated that way. Nobody tried to scold or like correct Sean's behavior. Instead, they would often, take his side, or Sean knew that he wasn't going to get into trouble. And it got to the point where Tara was covering up for some of that behavior. Like, it specifically talks about the fact that during those moments of physical torment, and abuse, that she was actively laughing
Mm,
in order to make it seem as though Sean's just we're just messing around.
yeah.
It's just a joke. I'm not actually in pain, things like that. And that couldn't be further from the truth. But again, over and over and over again, she forgives Sean.
Mm.
and she just kind of continues to live with it. And that was probably, yeah, that was the hardest part, is like, man, I just want you to see, what it is that's going on. And not necessarily to open your eyes, but just I was waiting for either someone to rescue her, because there were moments of like hope for that. Like Tyler would say, like, you can stay with me, you can come live with grandma down the road or down the
Hmm.
mountain, or um, and there was even a moment where Sean was in the middle of the some of that abuse, that Tyler walks in and sees it,
Mm.
and puts a stop to it, because and the father and mother were both home, and both like witness to it, the mom especially. And um and Tyler defends Tara, but not like, he gives her the keys to like drive away, basically.
Mm.
And but like, there's nothing long term. Like, there was a short term like help, but there
Mm.
wasn't a long term help. And I felt like that was really unfortunate.
Oh, it's so despairing at that point. Yeah, you want Tyler really, and Tyler is kind of a
A
bit of a
bit,
hero in
yeah.
the book, but
Yeah.
he's also from that environment and from that family, and although he's stepped away from it and gone to university, and he gets married, and he doesn't live close to the family after that point, but he's come back at that point, and even he though is still part of that environment, and he still, I think, can be forgiven for not intervening more,
Hmm.
because he's also indoctrinated and brainwashed by this family that
Hmm.
you know
At the
and he
very least, he has
yeah,
to fight against it, right? Like,
yeah,
fight
yeah.
against those ideals that he grew up with, um, question them, um, decide what he's going to like, how he's going to react, with new information or existing information. So, like, yeah, I felt like Tyler was a conflicted soul, um, though he was one of the more outsiders of the family.
Mm. Yeah, I think you're right, and I think the pull of that family is really quite strong, and we can go into this a little bit later on, kind of some of the information outside of the book,
Hmm.
and also in the book, but later on in the book, that the pull of having to make that decision as to whether you are going to continue to be an active member of the family or be ostracized
Yes.
is it's a really big decision to make, and I think that's also a decision that Tyler had to make almost at that point. He could,
Hmm.
he could, um, maybe the thought of being ostracized from the family and not being a part of that family unit anymore was too much to really do anything more.
I I want to say that almost every single one of Tara's siblings and Tara had to eventually make that choice.
Mm.
Um, and it definitely becomes more apparent in the later like half of the book than the first half of the book. Really is focused on like how they grew up, describing those situations, telling those stories, those harrowing injuries that occurred, and then the basically from the point where um, Tara describes to her parents that she wants to go um, to school. They say no. She pushes back and says, okay, then I'm going to get a copy of a textbook, and I'm going to make sure that I carve out time to learn some algebra, so that she can take the ACT exam and potentially try to attend a university.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really until that point that you started to get more of that push and pull of, um, being a part of the family or going against the grain. So yeah, I don't know. I was thinking about this before the podcast. Like what is spoiler, what is not spoiler, and I suppose if we are going to talk about the second half of the book, that would probably be the most spoiler, heavy parts of the book. Um, so if you are curious about reading this book, and you don't want to hear how the rest of the story for Tara plays out, if this is something that you've like heard enough about, between some things that we saw, some things that you've heard about this story about Tara, then I would say just a blanket, if you're going to turn it off, basically if you're going to turn the podcast off or pause it and come back and listen to it after you've read it, then I would say that at the very least, I feel like Claire and I can both give a recommendation that we would suggest reading the book, um, if that's something that you're interested in, before we go ahead and talk about spoilers.
Yeah, for sure. I would read it. I think I would recommend people read it. An interesting story. It's got some really interesting themes in it, and it's definitely worth a go. And interestingly, it was on the bestseller list for quite a long time.
It was.
And it came out the same time as Michelle Obama's book,
Yeah.
and Michelle Obama actually recommended other
She
people read
endorsed,
it.
yeah, she endorsed this book. Yeah.
um, so it's a worthy read, absolute worthy read, and
Yeah.
ultimately it's a hopeful book, I think. All right, so from this point on, we are going to be talking about a book more in depth, and there will be some spoilers. So let's move along. Do we want to talk about university?
Yes, let's do that. So Tara um, takes the ACT. She passes. She, on her application, says that she has attended a rigorous homeschool program, of which didn't get questioned, um, by Brigham Young University. And so she was granted acceptance and admission, and starts to engage in some studies outside of the home, where she finally gets away for a little while.
Yeah. Um, and this is really where her sort of awakening starts to happen, but it's quite a long time coming. So she's learning a lot about particularly history. She goes to Brigham Young because she wants to study music, and then when she gets there, she finds this love of history and philosophy and that sort of thing, and uh, yeah, that's really good. But she really her education starts then, and that's when she starts educating herself about the world that she's been living in.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where she understands about things like the Holocaust. And then I think almost the bigger shock for her was finding out about slavery and the civil rights movement.
Yes.
And I think the slavery thing is really interesting because she knew about slavery from a history book that her dad had, which gave a very skewed account of slavery and how it was. I don't even know. This is horrendous, but the book was written from the perspective of it was actually quite a burden for the owners, not the slaves, which is just so unbelievable that that could actually be written down in a book that people read. To me, that is abhorrent. So she finds out about slavery, and then she finds out about the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King, and that's when I think it really hits her that things have happened that are awful within the lifetime of her mum. So it's recent history. and she kind of doesn't quite believe that she doesn't know about it. And I think that's really when her awakening comes for outside perspective and learning about the world that she lives in. And sort of that's when she really gets off the mountain. Um, I don't think she learns enough about herself at that point, but at least she is learning about world events and her own country and where she's from.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you described it perfectly, Claire. She was instantly interested in um, not only historical events, but historians
Mm.
and how someone can write about or give a point of view of a historical event that is either inaccurate or just like their own view of it. And like you said, and publish it in a book and have people read it and believe it. Um, and so I think that kind of just immediately struck her curiosity. And so she just dove into it. And the rest of her educational career in university was pretty much dedicated to learning about history, learning about different viewpoints, different historians, and why they why they chose to recount historical events the way that they did, the philosophy behind, you know, different perspectives of a historical event, or it just hit, things that have happened. Um, so yeah, I mean, it was really interesting to see her find that niche and
Mm.
be able to dive into it so deeply. And I mean, who does she have to thank for that? Her father,
Hmm.
really. Like, because she grew up reading, or not reading, I should say. She grew up hearing about, historical events such as the Holocaust, um, or viewpoints of the world through the lens and through the censoring of her father and how it related to scripture as well. And so yeah, it really interesting. And this was the moment where I thought, okay, we are like, she's seeing other perspectives, she's being exposed to things. Now she's going to be able to challenge her parents, challenge her family, and really this is where I thought like the rebellion, was going to take place. Except
Yeah,
it
and it's
except it
didn't really.
didn't.
Yeah,
And
it kind of
yeah.
carried on a little bit. She kept, like we mentioned earlier, she kept getting pulled back to that world. She it was like one step forward, two steps back.
Hmm.
It was that kind of um, there was she so Brigham Young University is a mainly Mormon university, I
It
believe.
it is founded. I believe the foundation of Brigham Young is in Mormonism, and I don't know that it's necessarily a private college, but I could be totally ignorant to that,
Right.
to the
So I
connection.
know that the people around her were also Mormons, and to a lesser or greater degree, mainly lesser. So I know that when she first gets to university, she's shocked because her roommates are studying on a Sunday,
Yeah,
or wearing things that are not totally modest. And they don't really understand her. She doesn't really understand them, and I think she really struggles with that because it's so other from what she's been brought up in. And she's very keen to keep those standards of that world that she's been brought up in because that's what she believes is the correct way to behave. And she says in the book she's not there to make a judgment on religion or religious beliefs. That's not what the book is about. It's
yeah.
about you know getting educated. I did want to say, not everyone that has been brought up in that kind of situation could drag themselves out of it by reading books and going to university and everything else. And I think she's got a great advantage in a natural intelligence and
Yes.
curiosity. And I think that's taken her a long way. And I think also that's another thing that she can probably thank her father and mother for, because they're both, whatever faults they have, they're both pretty clever people. They've got a
Mm-hmm.
lot of nous. They
Yeah.
kind of they know what they're doing. Like I said, her father could design buildings that stay standing, and that's not actually an easy thing to do. Um, so I think they had a natural intelligence that they inherited, and that's why um, they've been able to actually embrace this secondary education, even though they had a pretty poor education earlier in life.
Yeah, they're basically the way that her father described it was like you're getting the curriculum of the mountain, and of what your mother and I feel are important things to know, important skills to know for the end times. Like that was their curriculum.
Mm, absolutely. And I think what's also so she starts going to church, and so there's a few things now. They're getting muddled up in my head, but I think um there's a point where she may have to quit college because she
Mm-hmm.
can't afford tuition, or to she can't afford to pay her rent. She needs a root canal that's going to cost $1,400. She's got $20 in her bank account, and she thinks she's going to have to quit college and go home. And she's really sad about that. She doesn't want to do it, but she talks to the bishop of her local church that she's been visiting, and he, I think, really was quite instrumental in keeping her at college because he was desperate to keep her there. He offered her money from the church. He begged her to apply for government grants,
Mm-hmm.
neither of which she would accept. Um, he then wrote her a check from his own personal checkbook. He just wanted her to stay in college,
Yeah.
and I think without that, she probably wouldn't actually have continued. But it's difficult to know what would have actually happened. But and she did eventually apply for a government grant. But it was, again, it was that upbringing. I mustn't get help from the government; they're evil.
Yep.
I can't take money from the church; that would be a sin. I will just deal with the pain of my tooth, and I will not pay my rent, and I'll go home. And that was, I
Mm-hmm.
think one of her friends eventually got her to apply for this government grant, and that was how she ended up staying in university. Um,
Yeah. So and I believe the bishop was affiliated with the university as well.
yeah,
So like um, when she was going through this brief moment of like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I need to talk to somebody. I believe the like either financial counseling slash like school counseling that they had available was this bishop, and so through that they were able to kind of connect. And I would say that this person was very influential for the story, and her continuing with the education that she was receiving at Brigham Young, but also then eventually further. But I thought what was interesting about that was she described that she basically laid it all out there, which might have been one of the first times that she really opened up to somebody that about like her life on the mountain.
yeah,
So this bishop was aware of some of the abuse that was taking place, some of the very dangerous labor conditions that she would have to be put in or deal with. And he was like, I think there was like an ethical battle that they I believe they describe the bishop as a man that he was dealing with. And so he just was like, he saw the potential in Tara and was hearing all of these horror stories and was just like, I can't I can't not try to get you to stay by all any and all means. I believe like even Tara in the book says like he flat out says like you cannot go back there. Like
Mm.
it is not,
And I think
not only is
she's
there too
quite.
much potential in you as a student that's wasted, but also just I think there is an unspoken where he never came out and said like that is not a healthy place for anyone to be, and that's where I think there's a little bit of that cover up mentality of that can often come with religion, but still there's that human element there that he needed and felt like he needed to help her. So yeah, I just thought that that was such a huge turning point for her,
Mm.
and that
I
she
think when
took it.
someone, yeah, absolutely. And when someone tries that hard to stop you from doing something that would be self-destructive, that's when you start to hear it. You start hearing, oh, okay, maybe making that decision is wrong then. That's when you start to think maybe the going back would be a bad idea. And I think she's quite stubborn in that I think eventually she says, I have to go back for the summer. I can't afford my rent. I'm going back or something. And I think it's the bishop that says, okay, if you must go back, please don't work in that scrapyard or junkyard or
Yeah,
something. And then I think she does end up working back in the junkyard.
she does. Yeah,
Um, and more accidents happen and people get hurt and it's horrendous. But she does get back to university, which is good. But she goes back and the abuse starts again, and
yeah,
it's you just want to go, don't go back there.
yeah,
And I think it's not until she then meets the professor that suggests that she goes to a summer school at Cambridge University in England.
yeah. Basically, like a travel or study abroad program is what
Yeah.
that's kind of what I saw it as. I don't know if they described it as like a missions type trip related to like any sort of religious,
No, I don't think
reasoning.
so.
Okay, it
Yeah,
was just like a study abroad. Yeah.
just a study abroad thing, I think, and she doesn't discuss any really anything religion related when it comes to university at all. She only
Mm-mm.
really talks about um, the education that she's receiving, philosophy, the books she's reading, the discussions that she's had with other students while she's been abroad, talking about art and literature and philosophy and all of that sort of stuff. And religion doesn't really come into it at all at that point. It's just ideas and talking about stuff. And I think that's when she probably there's no turning back at that point, I think, for her.
Yeah. Yeah. It's before we jump to like the Cambridge and then further, I just wanted to, because this is a moment in the book where Tara is basically like, she would come home on breaks and she was being exposed to like other potential like partners, I guess. Like she never actively says, like she describes a lot of these men that she is hanging out with as friends, not really like a significant other or anything. There's the potential for that, I think, but she just describes them as friends. And so I think that there's some exposure there to see how other people live that was really influential, and them kind of seeing what Tara had to endure or hearing about it. That was also interesting. But one thing that I wanted to touch on, aside from that, was this idea of her coming and going, because during this undergraduate career, she was kind of coming back and then she was leaving again to go to school and then she was coming back. And this, I felt like she said this multiple times that when she would come back to the mountain, it was always like she was transformed back into that 16-year-old girl she kind of describes, and like um it's almost as if she never left, in terms of like how she feels about it, about being back at home, about working in the scrapyard again, about listening to her father's lectures. Like there was still no point of like I don't want to say judgment, but like that rebellion of like I don't believe the same things that you believe anymore. Um, there's never a challenge, for her dad that challenged. I mean, he challenged her, but she never challenged him on things, and I was just like, it just brought up a lot of this mentality that as children that come back home, I have found that I transform
Hmm.
back into like what it was like to be a teenager living in my parents' house again. Like, and I still do that. Like, and I'm an adult, and so I was wondering if that ever happens to you.
In a way, it does. I think I'm a little bit different in that I left home at quite a young age, and I've been back several times
Mm-hmm.
for short periods, and
Okay.
I'm probably I don't really transform into a younger version of myself. I don't think I ever was a younger version of myself. I think I came out like fully mature almost. No, not quite, but
Mm-hmm.
certainly from quite a young age, I was quite grown up. Um, but I think that I do project a particular version of myself when I'm at home with my family, and
I
it's not
do too.
necessarily, yeah, it's not necessarily the same version that presents out to the world.
Same.
So I think in that respect, my family probably have a different, um, maybe a skewed view of me
Mm-hmm.
compared to everybody else. I don't know why, but yeah, it's definitely a different version of me that goes home.
Same. Um,
And it's probably less open, actually. I'm probably much
much.
more open talking to the world on a podcast than I am necessarily talking to close family.
Same. Come 100% the same. And so, first of all, thanks for not making me feel alone in that, because it's honestly like, Claire, it's something that I have talked about in therapy before too, of like, you know, just transforming back to either old habits or like how a view of like how what I want them to see of me, but it always leaves this like feeling of like, well, they don't really see the real me,
Hmm.
or I'm hiding it from them, or and I grew up religious, as you know, I grew up religious, and then I did have like a pushback challenge phase, and I guess I was, to tie this back into the conversation of the book, I was waiting for that to happen with Tara. I was waiting for her to have that like, no, I'm not going to church. No, I'm not religious anymore. Um,
Mm.
that moment, and it it didn't happen for her really. Not in the same way that it happened to me, for sure.
I I think I think there's a very large element of self-preservation in that she doesn't want to challenge it in so much as she will her actions are challenging it
Mm-hmm.
by going to university and not getting married and having children at 19 and
Yeah.
staying at home and becoming a midwife. Those actions are absolutely rebelling against her father's view of what her life should be. But I think for her own self-preservation, there's a certain amount of fear of actually being challenging at home. Um, and I think the book in itself is a challenge to her
Oh,
family because they're all
I.
still alive and they've all read it, I'm sure. And
Yeah.
you know, so but it's a challenge from a distance. It's not an actual confrontation. It's not, and I think you see it again and again in the book. Somebody will be talking to her later on in the book when she's really
Mm-hmm.
made up her mind and she is separate from that life. Um, people will talk to her and she will just smile benignly and nod. And she viscerally disagrees with them, but she won't vocalize it. And I think that's for her own protection.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you're more comfortable with your family and you're not scared of them,
Mm-hmm.
you're not scared of what they're going to do because they're so unpredictable. That's
Yes.
when you can have those more difficult, challenging discussions.
That's true. That's very fair.
Yeah.
Um, I just wanted that for her, I guess.
Yeah, me too.
There's multiple moments where I just was like, I am so curious about like your mental state of being. Like I want to hear her say that my brother Sean was the antagonist of my life, or um, you know, but she never really does. She says that she knows that he has issues and that they're unaddressed, and she even, later in the book, kind of talks about attempting to get her siblings on board to like, hey, if we're going to do something about Sean, we gotta I'm gonna need your support. I'm gonna need your help. And um, her sister turns a blind eye completely and basically
That's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because it's her
it
sister
is.
that sort of initiates
Yeah.
the. So she goes home. She's staying with her grandmother in town, and or grandfather in town, sorry. And her sis, she's gone to see her sister who lives nearby. Their two children, and it comes up out of the blue that, and it's kind of a revelation to them both that he has actually abused both of them. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's been abusive towards both of them. They've both suffered from it. And her sister's the one that actually instigates, let's do something about it. Let's try and sort this out. I think part of it is we want to save him because he's damaged and broken and does this to people. And obviously to save his wife and his children from that, also that abuse. Um, and so Tara takes that and she's like, "Yep, let's go and talk to mum and dad." And then they try and do that, and then all of a sudden, Tara's like, "Oh yeah, by the way, Sean abused me. He's an abusive person. He
Mm-hmm.
needs help." Blah blah blah. Her sister then all of a sudden is like, "Oh no, Tara made me do it. Tara made me come and talk to you about it. I'm really sorry. I'm terrible. I'm evil." Um, and it's the whole world turns against her again, and
Yeah,
it's just devastating.
it is.
And more so for the sister because Tara at that point is safe out in the
Yes,
world.
Tara. I think at that point she was potentially living in Boston. So, um, so yes,
But
I
his
completely
young
agree.
family are in danger, and his sister and his siblings are in danger from him still.
Yeah,
They're still in his orbit. And that's, I think, the biggest thing for me is like that nothing ever happened to fix that problem. And is he still out there abusing people? I don't know. That's
you have to
sad.
figure. Yeah, I mean, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Because um, it's disheartening to say, but ends up getting married, and Tara talks about the fact that she knows that his wife probably goes through some of the things that she went through, experiences some of those horrible things, and he ends up having a child as well, that had some pretty significant medical needs, and still his anger and flares up multiple times in the story. Um, there's a moment where uh, Tara is attempting to get her mom and dad on board with getting Sean help, or at least confronting them about the situation. And her dad says, "Where's the proof?"
Yeah.
After
And
all
then all
the
of it
after all
happened.
the years, yeah.
Yeah.
Where's the
It's
proof?
unbelievable.
And it is unbelievable, yeah. And uh, they end up calling Sean and saying like, you need to come up to the house, your sister's saying the this, that, and the other thing. And um, he comes to the house with a knife with
Hmm.
blood on it, and it's later found out that he, in out of anger,
Hmm.
although I think that it's described as apparently Sean's dog needed to be put down, but it just so happens that he did this right before coming over to the house to talk about this
Yeah.
situation in which he is very mad and upset with Tara, that she would even suggest that he's been abusive towards her, and then threatens to kill her
Hmm. It's
openly.
terrifying. That part of the book is absolutely terrifying. It reads like a horror story.
It
Um,
does.
and yeah, I think what then, I mean, he doesn't kill her. She
No,
does
she
leave
gets away.
again and
Yeah.
she gets away. And then what starts to happen is her sister and her mother start to backtrack on the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
And then her mother at one point is like, well, he was trying to protect you, or he was trying to make you feel comfortable by giving you the knife so you wouldn't feel threatened by him because he'd had to kill Diego,
Mm-hmm.
which makes no sense. And then later on, apparently, the story changed to there was never a knife.
Right.
So her mother, while on board at one point with the whole Sean has been abusive, I'm going to fix it. I'm really sorry that this happened to you. I should have protected you more. All of that stuff then turns into, oh, she made it all up. It's not true. Yeah. And it's just another more evidence of. It should also be noted that her mother had had quite a significant brain injury that never got treated.
True.
Um, and so I think
So
she
did
was after
Sean.
that more, and so did Sean. They were both more susceptible after that, I think, and certainly her mother, I think, was a lot more susceptible after that to the brainwashing and gaslighting, and that's basically what happened to the whole family. And it's so frustrating because you can't fix it, and I don't think Tara can fix it. And I think when she
No.
realised that, and she realised that her life was not going to continue, being in that sphere, she had to walk away and I guess accept that she wasn't ever going to change those that way of life, those views, and how her parents saw that whole situation. But it's, yeah, absolutely devastating.
Not
But I
only.
really thought he was going to kill someone. I really thought that when I was reading the book,
Yeah.
I thought, oh God, you know,
Or yeah, that he was going to try to, or
yeah.
that or because he threatened to kill her himself or to hire somebody to do it for him. And I was like, oh my gosh, like she's never going to be able to come back.
No.
But she does end up coming back after that, a few times. One time her family goes to Boston. So I guess we should say, timeline wise, she goes to Cambridge. She has an amazing time. She's exposed to other cultures and learns a heck of a lot from Cambridge. Somebody at Cambridge, I believe, encourages her to leave Brigham Young and attend university for a PhD program at Harvard,
Mm.
and
Masters at Harvard,
masters at
PhD at
Harvard.
Cambridge. Yeah, yeah,
Thank you,
masters at
thank
Harvard.
you.
Yeah.
So she ends up going being accepted to Harvard and attends university for her master's there, and her family comes out to visit. Um, Basically says, this is the last attempt at bringing you back, or something like that. Like, we can see that you're living with the devil. said something to the effect of like Lucifer is all around us right now. Um, she has a picture of MLK, like a poster of MLK in her room, and her family is basically like ready to pick up and leave if she doesn't come back to them right now. And she says, "No, I'm going to stay." And she talks about the fact that she was concerned that that was the last time she'd ever see them.
Mm. Yeah, he offers to give her a blessing, which will,
Yeah.
allow God back into her heart and drive out the devil. And obviously, she refuses at that point, and she makes a decision internally at that point that that's her turning her back on that life and her that doctrine
Mm-hmm.
at that point. She doesn't tell her family that at that point. She just stays silent, but obviously doesn't go ahead with the blessing. And yeah, it's a pretty profound moment. But again, she's not challenging them. She's just
Nope.
letting them say their piece, and then she's moving on with her own thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so, just thinking about the rest of the story, and I don't know if our do we want to specifically talk about the very end and like post book
I think we can
topics.
talk a little bit about post book stuff. I think the very end of the book we can probably keep for people if they want to
Sure.
read it. But it's a pretty, you know, fairly happy ending. Um,
I think as happy as it could be.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I would say Tara is safe. Like she's basically accepted that she is not going to be um, welcome in her family, to like in the sense of like she has left the family ideals, and she's left with some broken relationships with her siblings. Although she does describe that her brother Tyler, she still has a pretty good relationship with.
I think
um,
she's still in touch with two or three of her siblings.
mm-hmm.
Um, and she's in touch with her aunts and uncles and
Yes,
people that are outside of that
that
narrow
immediate circle. Yeah.
immediate circle. Um, and her parents have done very well at the end of it
Isn't
because
that isn't that
it's ironic.
Yeah, I honestly I
Yeah,
hate that. I'll be
yeah.
completely honest with you. I hate that.
I mean, they're not doing anything with it other than yeah. I mean,
No, but they're I think she describes, or like she estimates that they could be potential millionaires
mm.
or something like that.
Yeah, and it's the essential oils business, the herbalism business that has really taken off, and
Yeah, that kind
yeah,
of boomed in the last decade.
yeah.
That her mother has really gained a lot of popularity, both as a midwife, but also just in her remedies. And they talk about like um, she basically has like a whole crew now. Like she has
Mm.
multiple employees that help her with this, and that she sends tinctures all over the country. I'm not sure if they're international, but they describe it as being extremely profitable.
Yeah, yeah. Which they, apparently they use the money to prepare for the end times.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they've got enough food to last for decades and fuel and all that sort of stuff for when the end comes. Um, so yeah, it's kind of sad that other than having more money in a larger house, they haven't changed really at all by the end of the book. They're,
Mm-hmm.
still engrossed in that doctrine and that way of life, and that's some people that you can't reach. I think that's sad, but there are some people that you just cannot reach, and you cannot change their perspective on anything. But I think the break of the relationship does come from that whole Sean episode, doesn't it? It
It
comes from
does. Yeah.
her accusing Sean of being abusive and them not accepting it, and then unless she actually goes back on what she describes as, unless she accepts that their reality is what happened, she can't ever go back, and that's kind of where she ends up, and that's, you know, an acceptance of that happens, I think. And it's
Yeah.
probably the best decision, you know, absolutely the best decision to accept that unfortunately her family and her are going to be estranged, and
Hmm.
there's not a lot she can do about that, and hopefully in the future that will change. She's still quite a young woman, I believe, so
Right, right.
hopefully she'll get a chance to maybe reconcile with her family in some respects, and they might, you never know, they might come around to understanding her perspective. I don't know, but we can hope.
I don't know. Okay, so let's talk. We'll talk. I think we've said enough about the story itself.
Mm.
Um, what what do you hope for Tara moving forward? Because her story hasn't ended in the sense that like there's still time, right? And I guess what are your hopes for her after? I mean, she's very successful. From from the sense of where she grew up and how she started. What are your hopes for her now as a reader?
I mean, I would really like to read some academic work from her. I'd like to, not a memoir, but I would
Mm-hmm.
like to read some of her own academic work. So if she wanted to write a book about, you know, social history, I would, or even the science of looking at history, is because actually she ends up doing a PhD in histography, which is the study of historians, not history,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is actually a really important thing, and it hadn't really occurred to me because I love history and I've done a bit of study on it, and I understand the different perspectives that you get of history from different authors or different historians, and so that is really interesting to me. The study of historians
Yeah.
is actually really interesting to me. So I would love her to write something like that. Um, I think I would also. I don't hope for her to reconcile with her family, but I would hope that her family may become uh, some way to meet her in perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and including, you know, the brothers and sisters that she is still close to. You know, because I think that they also probably have a fairly warped reality. And then also, I hope that, you know, she manages to work through everything that she's been through. I know,
Yes.
having seen some of the stuff that she's talked about after the book's been published, um, that she has extensive had extensive therapy to work through some of the issues, um, and I'm hoping that that's still, you know, ongoing, and that she's still working through that,
Mm-hmm.
and that she gets to a place where she's not over it, but at least comfortable with it. Because I know that she did quite an. I was watching this interview. I know you watched it as well. Um, she did a year-long book tour as soon
Mm-hmm.
as this book was published, and it occurred to me as she was saying it that this is absolutely right. She basically had to go on a book tour talking about not just a book, but her actual life as it was lived and the painful stuff that happened to her. And when you have to keep reliving that over and over and over again every day for a year,
Mm-hmm.
that's got to be hard. That's got to
Yeah.
be really hard. So, yeah, I hope that she's getting a nice break now, but also writing some more stuff about other things.
Right.
Perhaps, you know, moving on from the memoir. What about you?
I hope that she lets go of her family. Um, I hope that she doesn't continue to uh, go back. Honestly, because I think that she I don't know. What I'm trying to say is like I hope that she doesn't continue to hope for something there. That is something that she can change, and if she has a desire for family and to have a family, I hope that she has found that outside of her biological family, um, because um, I I don't think that she'll find it there. I guess as a reader, as somebody completely on the outside, I think that it is probably in her best interest to disassociate
Yeah.
from them. It's probably the healthiest situation. Um, I also would like to hear more about, and this book was not a place for her to, where she described this or said that she was going to talk about this, but I would be very interested to hear her thoughts on religion now. She does not get into that, and in some of the interviews that I watched of her after reading this book, uh, one of the interviews ended with an audience member asking her to sing a song, and because she in the book she is a singer, she's a good singer at that, and um, I thought it was insanely ironic that she chose a biblical hymn to sing, and I was part of me was like, are you still religious?
I did wonder that myself, and I think the impression I get is that she is still religious, just not quite so indoctrinated into that specific system.
Absolutely, absolutely, and um,
It's a difficult thing to let go of once, when you've been brought up. I'm sure you're aware
yeah,
that, it's a very difficult thing to let go of, because God can be very comforting,
mm-hmm.
to know that there is, or to feel like there is something bigger than yourself that is watching over you, or has the power to protect you, or any of that stuff. To let go of that, I think, is a really hard thing to do.
I think my own biases are a bit angry about that.
Yeah.
Um, I am not religious, um, but and I would have expected someone that grew up so not only religious but kind of on that extremist radical. She even describes it as a bit more on the radical side, for sure. And I I I am just surprised, I guess. If that were to be the case, I would be so interested, and not from like a sense of like anger, but I would be just so interested to hear how someone that has endured what she's endured, experienced what she's experienced, to come out on the other side and still have a relationship with God, I guess. And I'd be curious to know what that's like. I'd be curious to hear about that, and um, that also goes into like my wonderings about the psychology of it all. Um, having a background in psychology, I'm like super curious about that. And so, if she does write another book, I would hope that she would be willing to be more open about that, about those thoughts of hers that she might have. Because even in the interviews, most were surface level question interviews type thing. But I would be really interested to get her perspective now on on religion, on history, like you said, on some of those things, and see the connections that she's made.
Mm.
And maybe even hear about some ideals that she's brought with her from Mormonism or religion, her upbringing that she still holds on to, you know? And because I don't, she has never implied that the way that she grew up was, well, it didn't put her at a disadvantage, you know? Like,
Mm.
she's never played that card, I feel like. This book was quite literally a factual retelling and recanting of her experiences.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, that's what I would hope.
I think just on the subject of her writing about religion, I think that would be, I don't know, the impression I get from being across the pond is that discussing your own religious beliefs or lack of is a really difficult thing to do in America because it is quite a divisive subject. It's
It
really emotive.
is.
People are very passionate about their beliefs. And I almost feel like it's quite a dangerous thing to admit to not believing in God or not having a religion or being an atheist or agnostic or whatever that form takes. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost more difficult. Um, and also, it can separate you from the people that perhaps you want to reach as well if you're too open about that.
Or if you're like
Um,
two on one side or the other. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I think that's something that she's trying to do really effectively is to maintain a link to that rural religious community so as not to alienate them entirely. Because, and I think she makes a really good point in this, and she's been talking about it. Um, she wants people to have empathy and compassion for people that grow up in a very different environment to perhaps the people that live in an East Coast city like Boston or in New York or somewhere like that. America's a very very large place, and you have these communities that do not experience the world in the same way that other communities do. And if we alienate them, we're never going to get to a point of any kind of cooperation or um, agreements. And that's, I think, part of the problem with this divided society that we have, and we have it here as well as over in the US. We're a lot smaller, but the divide in society is quite scary, and I think trying to bridge that divide is probably where she sits.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Um, yeah, yeah. And I think more than anything, I'm just interested in it. Like I'm the divisiveness that we currently have right now in the year 2022
Hmm.
is large, and it has religion is just one aspect of that divisiveness, um, and I would hope that like my I guess my view on it is like as long as you're not hurting or like as long as it's not hurting others, um I don't have a problem with anybody anything that anybody believes, but when it's actively putting others at risk or harming others, then that's where I guess that's where I personally draw the line. And so there's there's nothing wrong with like if she comes out on the other side and she is religious and she still believes in God and has a relationship with God. I'm more than anything just kind of curious about that, and I
Mm.
would be really interested to hear um, her thoughts on that. But I don't know. It's very difficult for me to justify that um, the radicalness, is that even a word, the radical nature of how she was raised I cannot say that I agree with nor um, support. You know,
Yeah.
as an okay thing for children and for people. And I know that
No,
you
I'm
feel the same
completely with
way.
you on that.
Yeah, I
I'm
know.
completely with you on that.
I
I'm
know.
I think what I sort of admire, and it's something that I find very difficult to do, is to have compassion for people that have ideas that are so strongly opposed from my own. And that's part of the problem, isn't it? The fact that we are so, you have this view, I feel it's abhorrent, therefore I hate you.
Mm,
I struggle with that, absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
You know, it's um somebody that has but I think as human beings, we maybe have to delve deeper into why people have those views that are so abhorrent to us. And if we actually see them, and I think Tara makes this point as well in one of her post book interviews, if we value the human being, then they must be worth, um, talking to in a lot more, trying to trying to bring them round to more of our way of thinking, and also having compassion for the people and why they have those views. So I think she tells a really interesting story. She had some very, as she says, she had homophobic views and racist views
Hmm.
and all of that growing up because that's the environment that she grew up in. And um, it took somebody to see the humanity in her and that she wasn't just that person. She was many people, or, many versions of a person, that it was worth taking her out of that view. So I think she said something that was relatively homophobic, I think, at one point. And this guy basically sat up all night with her talking to her about it
Hmm.
because he saw that, he valued the fact that she was a human being. And one of the things he said to her was, this doesn't compute to me because you seem like a good person.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
if you are a good person, how does this idea fit with that?
Right.
And that, I think, sparked something in her, and then she thought about it a lot more, and she obviously completely changed her mind on the whole thing. So it just took, that person to see her as a whole person, not just this one aspect of her that, she was misguided on. So yeah, and it's a real difficult one for me because I do have a habit of very much, if you say something to me that's racist, then you're an asshole and I'm not going to talk to you anymore.
Hmm. Hmm.
And they
Hmm.
they probably are an asshole, but sometimes it might just be somebody that just has got the wrong idea from somewhere. They've been so indoctrinated that they do not understand fully what there is that they believe in.
I think that it also takes an open mind to, and I think that's where, like, yes, we cast like quick judgments, I guess, like in a situation like you described, like we can choose to interact with them or not interact with them after something is said like that.
Mm.
um if they are willing to have a conversation, I'm very open to it.
Yeah.
But if they're going to attempt to defend themselves, or defend what they said, I don't have time for that. I don't have time. That's and that's, I guess, maybe that's a downfall of my own,
Mm.
that I need to reflect on and work on. But like Sean and her dad, and even her mom to some extent, like throughout the stories, I'm just like, cut those ties. You're better off without them. Like,
Yeah.
and for better or worse, maybe that's very, very simple view, and for sure easier said to, as somebody just reading this book. But um, I mean, if she is able to um,
Hmm.
come out of it on the other side, and I'm just very interested in that. I'm just very
I mean,
interested in that.
I think she accepts that fact that she is now estranged from her family, and like you
Hmm.
say, she. I hope she has a chosen family
Me
that gives
too.
her the support that she needs, and I think most of us do that. We gravitate towards people that are supportive of us, and they become our chosen family, and that's a wonderful thing. She also says, I think, in the book and in post interviews as well, um, and it is possible to love someone and still say goodbye. And it is what was the other one? It was um oh, it's gone out of
It's
my head.
something to the
Similar to
effect
that.
of um, I can love someone and choose to
Oh,
not have
that's
them in
it.
my life.
Yeah, you can miss someone every day and still be glad that they're not in your life.
Yeah,
And that absolutely resonates with me.
totally.
Absolutely resonates with me.
There are people in my life absolutely that 100% fits. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, and it is healthy to let go of negative influences
It
and
is.
people that make your life harder. Um, and that can be a really difficult thing to do. Cut ties can be really difficult, but sometimes you get through it, and you come out the other side, and it's the world's a better place for you.
Mm-hmm.
So worth doing.
Absolutely.
So I think that brings us probably to a good conclusion on Educated by Tara Westover.
I think so. I think so. We should probably rate this book.
We should rate this book. Um, so I'm going to go ahead and just straight off the bat say I think I'm going to give it a 4-star
Okay.
rating.
Explain what a 4 star is for us.
So the rating system that we use, we do a 1 to 5 rating. 1 star is would be a complete waste of time. It was an awful book, inaccuracies, terrible writing, didn't finish it, anything like that. 2 stars was fine, but not particularly happy with it. It was irritating. Um, it was problematic, but I did finish it. Maybe I was a bit lost, or I had to read it. Didn't really enjoy it. Um, 3 stars, satisfactory, not too bad. So average but satisfying read. It was a little bit rewarding, not too much, not a total waste of time. I enjoyed it. I think anything 3 stars and over tends to be you would start
You would
recommending the
recommend
book
it? Yeah.
to other
Yeah.
people.
Mm-hmm.
4 stars is I loved reading it. It's a really good book. There could be very minor improvements, but that's okay. I like the writing style. The author thoroughly researched the topic. Made a little bit of an impact on my point of view, but it didn't fundamentally change my point of view on anything. And then 5 stars would be impactful. So it's really a book that is pretty flawless as far as being an awesome read. You really loved reading it, but also it's had a major impact on you in some way. So something that you're not going to forget reading it. It's going to have made you think about something in a different way, or um, yeah, something that you're going to remember.
Mm-hmm.
So that is our rating system.
So
So for me, this one is a 4 star. So I did love reading it. I really enjoyed reading it. The writing style was accessible.
it was very.
I think almost anybody could read this, and the pace of it is really good. It's not overly long,
No.
um, and it gave me some real food for thought about the differences between growing up in a insular, isolated, very rural community against being brought up in a much more liberal setting. Um, so yeah, definite 4 for me. What about you?
Um, Same. I'm gonna do the same. 4 stars. I looked forward to reading. Like I looked forward to getting more of it. When I would stop reading it or listening to it, I would think about it and I'd want to consume a little bit more of it, and it was very digestible. I felt like the writing style you said was accessible. I think that that's a perfect way to describe it. I would say that there was a lot of time spent describing some pretty horrific accidents that occurred, and the way that it was described was, I mean, unfortunately entertaining.
Mm.
But I would say that if you're somebody with like a squeamish stomach, or like don't like that sort of a thing, that would be difficult to kind of get through some of those incidents. Um, you
You could
know,
probably skip some passages. I think
you probably
that would
could
probably
skip
work. Yeah.
ahead. Yeah. Um, I I think that there could be minor improvements. Like I kept saying, it was very factual. I would have liked to have heard some of her reflections on some things. Um, I would also maybe like to hear from her in the book, like some revelations, some uh, there's a lot of like, this happened to me, and then no resolution of how it changed her behavior or how it changed her viewpoints of things. And I would have liked more of that. Kind of coming back to some of the things that I hope for that maybe we see eventually from her if she chooses to do so. Um, so those are some I guess complaints about the book, but overall, I loved it. I would recommend it to pretty much anybody that was looking for an interesting nonfiction book to read. I think somebody on one of the interviews said something to the effect of like, they think it should be part of like every high schooler's curriculum, like literacy curriculum, and I'm like, I don't know about that. I don't know that I'd go that far, but it sure is like a great story about a culture that I don't have, so that much connection to. It's one of those things that, like, oh, you hear about that stuff out there, but you don't always know the full story or hear too much about it. So,
So the only thing I really know about Mormons is the whole being able to have more than one wife. That's
mm.
kind of, the only thing I know, and I don't think that's actually very common
It's not.
anymore.
I don't
But
think it's
yeah,
practiced very much.
yeah. But other than that, yeah, I don't really know anything about it at all.
Yeah.
Does make me want to look into it a little bit more, but then also I think, do I?
Well,
Maybe.
I think, I guess to kind of summarize everything, is that at the very beginning of the book, in the prologue, um, Tara says, like, I have nothing against Mormonism. And she, basically says, like, with any organization, cultural, religious affiliations, with a group come a spectrum of um, regular practice, and then all the way down to light practice on the other side, versus like some of the more radicalism, that can occur. So there are a lot of within Christianity alone, there's many different like spots on the continuum of where they practice and what they believe. And so this is just an example of a pretty extremist portion of that. And so that's not to say that Mormonism is wrong or bad at all. But this is just a story about a particular side of that.
Mm. Okay. So that, I think, brings us to the end of
It
our
does.
discussion about Educated by Tara Westover.
It
Um,
does.
it was a really good one. Good discussion, good book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, real quick before we end, we'll um, we're going to be back in 2 weeks' time. So we're looking at May 8th.
Hmm.
We are going to be discussing our next book. This will be a fiction book called The Kaiju Preservation Society. Um, and so look forward to that. And Claire, do you want to plug our socials?
Yes. So, if you would like to look at our Twitter, we are the underscore book underscore Nook, and Nook, I believe, yeah, Nook actually is N00K because we started this a bit late and all the names have been taken. And then Instagram we are TBN underscore the underscore book underscore Nook, and that's where we are on socials. And then also Discord, we are there. Um, I think we can try and put a link to the Discord in the podcast description.
We can.
Um,
That's true.
so please join that and discuss anything to do with reading, any books at all that you're looking at, or join in with any discussions that we have in there. And yeah, that's it for our socials.
Yeah. So this was
Yeah,
this was a heavier discussion. We talked about some pretty um, sensitive topics, and we kind of knew that going into it. So I'm looking forward to episode 3, which will be probably a lot more lighthearted, talking about kaiju monsters. But that's not to say that this wasn't thoroughly enjoyable. And thanks, Claire. I always appreciate it.
thanks, Tim. Yeah, I do. I still love doing this book, book podcast with you. So I'm really looking forward to 2 weeks time, and we will see you all then.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Yay.
End scene.
End scene.
So we're still streaming for anyone that's still in the chat.
Yes.
We just sign off on the podcast bit so that Tim can edit it.
Yeah. That it's just helpful for me because then I know when to cut some audio. But yeah, that was a heavy one.
It was.
I feel I feel tired after that.
Mm.
But it was a good conversation. There's just a lot to cover. I mean, there was a lot of stuff in that book.
So much to go through. Yeah, there's a lot. And we could have gone on for hours and hours and hours, I think.
Easily. Because I feel like we just kind of like brushed over the part where she like went to Harvard.
I know.
And,
yeah.
And then went back to Cambridge. Yeah.
It's, yeah. But I think we covered the important bit, and the foundation of it, I think, is the important bit. So
yeah.
And people need to go and read it. Really.
Absolutely.
And really to get the full feature of it. But yeah, it was really good. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for being here. Sorry about the slight technical hitch in the middle.
Yeah, that's my bad. Okay, so what happened with that technical issue is I was noticing on my volume levels that my mic seemed to be either picking up some interference or like it was kind of like doing this type of thing on my audio board, and every once in a while my microphone there will be a buzzing that occurs, and so I was like, oh no, has there been a buzzing this entire time?
I didn't hear any. No,
well,
so you're all right.
Okay, if you didn't hear any, sometimes the stream hears it. Keely, our friend Keely is usually like, he tells me, he usually messages me, and he didn't, but I was like, oh no, here we go. So I did the thing of unplugging my microphone and thinking that unplug it, plug it back in, it'll be fine. Well, I unplugged it, and Discord immediately said, hey, you no longer have a microphone, so we're going to tie your microphone into your headphones or something like that. So my input-output got completely wrecked.
Oh, no. So that would be why.
So, yeah. So, apologies for that.
It's fine.
I hope it's easy to edit. We'll see.
Well, I'm saying it's easy. I don't have to do it. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's your job.
Right.
I would do it, but I have no idea what I'm doing. And
no, honestly, I'm interested in it and I'm learning about it. It so far the first few episodes have been tedious, but I'm hoping that it gets easier as I'm getting like more accustomed to it and used to it. Also, a little behind the scenes thing is that I totally forgot to ask Blunk to change our graphic. So are educated. Oops, hold up. Now I'm messing with overlays and things. Um, so it still says Clara in the sun. I just put an edge, like I just put an image over the OBS layer.
Oh.
So when Blunk made the scene for us, he
Mm.
automatically put Claire in the sun in there. And so then I was just like, oh no, I gotta grab a quick thing because I totally forgot to ask him to change that. I mean, it's not a big deal, but
Oh well, we need to get that sorted then.
yeah, we do.
Oh dear.
I
Okay.
messaged him like 15 minutes before the pod got. I was like, "Are you there by any chance? Like, can you whip it?" But no, I was like, "I'll
So
just do this."
I have a
Nobody
question.
noticed.
I have a question.
Okay.
Is it bad that I actually listen to our podcasts after we've
No,
recorded them?
not at all.
So I never thought I'd want to do it because I hate the sound of my own voice
Yeah,
so much. But it's yeah, it's actually quite nice to have it on in the background and just playing away. You
yeah.
know, couple of hours of us chatting. I haven't been horrendously like put off by it yet,
No, no.
so that's good.
Um, Not at all. I honestly I haven't listened to them other than through editing,
Mm.
But even when I
Oh
was
yeah.
editing, I was like, we don't sound half bad. Like this, it actually works. Um, and I've gotten good feedback. People have said that our voices are calming,
Oh,
and
good.
so yeah. Lizard just said you both have
Oh,
great
thanks,
podcast
Lizard.
voices, so that's
Yeah,
really great to hear.
that is
Um,
good.
yeah, no, it didn't bother me nearly as much as I thought it would, to hear my own voice. But I'm also probably used to it now with streaming and
That's
just
true.
other ways of hearing my own voice, I guess. But yeah, it's. I mean,
I love listening to your voice. I'll quite happily listen to. I think you were streaming yesterday, and I kind of didn't get around to saying hello, but I had the stream on
yeah,
in the background, just listening to your voice, which is lovely. So,
yeah. Oh, I appreciate it. Stream's gone laggy, FYI, since you messed in Discord. Yeah, it didn't like what I did for sure.
oh, oh well.
It's
Well,
fine.
we're gonna sign off now anyway.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah, thanks again for coming and watching. It's really great to have you all here every
Yeah,
week. So,
absolutely.
or every other week.
If you're not already in our Discord, you should check out our Discord. And we always post updates there, probably more regularly. Claire and I need to talk about like what we're going to do with social media, because
Mm,
I think that we could do more with it. But yeah,
definitely. Definitely. Well, of course, after next week, I'm going to be free for a few weeks because I'm jobless on
yeah.
Friday this week coming up. So,
Congratulations, I think.
yeah, thanks. I mean, I'm just really lucky because I got made redundant and offered a job like 2 days later. So,
That's awesome.
um, I'm not worried about not working.
Yeah.
Luckily, but I do have a gap between one ending and the other one starting, like 6 weeks. So
Okay.
I will be around a little bit, and maybe I can put a little bit more effort into social media,
Okay.
or I can coerce somebody else to do it for us. Um,
Oh, interesting.
yeah.
Tim is the only person that can make fighting zombies into a meditation stream. I,
Yeah, right.
I thanks, I guess. I think that's a compliment. I'll take it.
It is. It is.
But yeah, everybody that watched on Twitch, really appreciate it. Means a lot to us that you're there, even if you're just lurking. And I guess we'll catch you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, and the podcast will be up in a couple of days, a few
A
days,
couple days, yeah.
a couple of days.
Usually,
Perfect.
I think I'm gonna target Wednesdays as our like release day. So
Sounds good.
yeah. All right. Well, thanks, chat. We'll talk to you later.
Bye, everyone. Bye, everyone.
Bye.